Welcome back, Andrew Cuneo here with another standard video. This time it's going to be another one of the standard metagame challenges. I'm going to take basically stock Izzet Hullbreaker Horror and run it through the metagame challenge. This is a pretty standard deck. I've seen a lot of people playing it. This isn't really my own list. I copied it from one of the Magic Online deck lists that you can get from their website. So basically this is a control deck. We've got 4 Hullbreaker Horrors, 2 Liers, 1 Smoldering Egg, and those are the ways you're going to close out the game, and then the rest is just removal spells. No hard counters because it's a Lier deck. There are some Jwari Disruptions, so maybe you can counter an early play, and there's Divide by Zeros to keep stuff off the board, take spells off the stack. Also, once the Hullbreaker Horror gets out, you can prevent your opponent from resolving any big spells. That's kind of why the Considers are in the deck. Consider's really good once you get a Hullbreaker Horror into play. Only 1 Cinderclasm in the main deck is a sweeper, and 1 in the sideboard. Some Flame Blessed Bolts, which is kind of like a new version of Magma Spray, and 1 Disdainful Stroke in the sideboard. So this is a very typical build of this deck, and I'm just going to go ahead and jump into one of the standard metagame challenges, and we'll see how it plays out. It's a nice hand. Expressive Iteration is really nice whenever you're on the play because you can cast on the 3rd turn pretty comfortably. That was maybe a mistake on my part not to lead on a mountain because I have Spikefield Hazard. So this is some sort of red-black mid-range deck. Do I even want a second Fading Hope? I think the answer is no. So let's put a mountain in my hand. Fading Hope on the bottom of the deck and play an island, I guess. Maybe that's a little bit worse than just having played a mountain. Depending on what the opponent does, I might want to play Prismari Command. I don't think so. I'm going to wind up, I'm going to get a treasure, deal 2 damage to that, and then finish it off with a Spikefield Hazard. This is all the setup for a Lier potentially next turn, and then I'll be able to use Fading Hope to protect the Lier from the first removal spell. Hopefully get a window where I can play Expressive Iteration again off of Lier. Goldspan Dragon's going to be a bit of a problem. I could give them a tremendous number of treasures next turn by double Spikefield Hazarding, plus Prismari Commanding it. Okay. I'm going to finish off this Tybalt, get another treasure. I'll use the treasure to hopefully protect my Lier. They have 3 mana, they could, yeah, alright. They can kill Lier, that's not good for me. Gonna put this back in their hand so I can get Teachings of the Archaic. Hopefully dig for a more permanent answer. I'm not going to be using the Field of Ruin, so let's just tap that. More lands is not what I needed. Alright. That was a lot of Goldspan Dragons. So against this deck, got Disdainful Stroke, which will be good against the dragons. Doesn't work once Lier is in play. I want another Lier. Test of Talents actually didn't look that good. I think these are the cards that I'm most interested in. Cards I'm not interested in. Cinderclasm for sure. I think Cathartic Pyre didn't really seem to have too many targets. Maybe one Prismari Command. I don't really have the ideal removal suite for Goldspan Dragons. Only 2 cards that deal 4 damage. One of them's at sorcery speed. I left all the Fading Hopes in my deck, in part because I can use them to protect my own creatures. Okay. Wasn't expecting that, but not too worried about it. Oh, this deck is much more beatdown than I was expecting. I sort of made a mistake by not just Jwari Disruptioning last turn. Come on, no dragon. Valky, God of Lies is perfectly fine. Second one's a little bit scarier. Guess I just need to hope that they don't have a way to interact with this in play. And they do. This is not a very good looking hand, but I think this might be kind of what you're signing up for with this deck. Come on, Cinderclasm. I don't think I'm desperate enough that I need to play the Expressive Iteration just as a pick one of the top 3 cards and put it in my hand card. We'll be able to divide by 0 something probably. Opponent seemed to have forgotten they could boast. They're just down a 1/1. Seems good for me. Why are they getting priority here? A little bit of confusion on their part about the rules. Indestructible is not the same thing as hexproof. Now they're boasting. They did show a valorous stance, so I think I don't need to expose the Hullbreaker Horror. I want this in my hand. That in my deck, and I think I'm just not going to cast that Unexpected Windfall. Opponent's way too far behind at this point. Alright, this is probably the most important matchup in Standard. White versus red-blue. I like all this stuff. What don't I like? Not that I need this many Hullbreaker Horrors. Don't really like Prismari Command all that much. It's kind of expensive. Guess I'm going to take out 2 Fading Hopes. I'm boarding in other cheap spells. Fading Hope really isn't very good if it's just you're just bouncing 1 and 2 mana creatures with it. It's really against the green deck where you're bouncing their 3 and 4 drops. It's at its best. I want a little bit of it to keep my Liers safe. I could go for a Cinderclasm. Or a Flame Blessed Bolt. As long as they can't get the egg off the board this turn, I'm in okay shape. I'll let that resolve and I'll just play the Consider for 3 since it makes the egg easier to flip. I'll be able to go Consider and then untap and Demon Bolt. Probably the Luminarch Aspirant at this point. My egg will be flipped. Maybe I should Demon Bolt the Thalia, actually. No. No need to pick anymore. That's a perfect card. I said this when I made the video about White Weenie. I really don't like Paladin class as a card at all. Like, the red-blue deck, which is where I think you're expecting it to be good, it's just in the sideboard games, the red-blue deck is perfectly fine playing at sorcery speed. It just doesn't make any sense. What would I want to discard? I think I'll just discard my land. If I don't find another land, I'll play this Jwari Disruption tapped. Do you have an answer to the Ashmouth Dragon? No. If anything, the Paladin class helped me this game. It made it easier for me to flip the Ashmouth Dragon. The only times when the Paladin class is actually effective against the red-blue deck in terms of a taxing effect is if you're worried about getting ambushed by a Hullbreaker Horror, but so few of the games actually play out in that way that I think you're just really wasting a card preparing for something that isn't that likely to come up. So this is probably some sort of Blood in the Snow deck. Should be a pretty good matchup for the deck I'm playing. It's very unfortunate I did not hit a land there. I don't think there's really any rush to get the egg into play. It's so likely to just die. I just want to do this in their combat steps so that they can't have access to 2 mana in their main phase to potentially cast a 2 mana card. Just going to be patient as I try to set up a spot where I can get the Hullbreaker Horror out and protect it. Shambling Gash, sure. Maybe messed up there. Guess I was supposed to not play the Smoldering Egg that turn so I could have access to Divide by Zero. Be a little bit scary if they play a Lolth this turn. Didn't really think that was game over. That was just their Lolth was going to die. That was all they could. That was all they could stomach, I suppose. Is Goldspan Dragon good here? What do I have that's bad? This can hit Planeswalkers. I don't think any of my cards are bad. Probably want a Disdainful Stroke. Probably don't need so many Fading Hopes. Test of Talents is nice just because it can hit Go Blank, and Cathartic Pyre is probably pretty bad. Prismari Command's probably pretty bad too. I really don't think that the archetype my opponent is playing is a good choice. I think they agree that it's really bad against blue-red, and I just don't think you're... For as bad as this deck is against blue-red, it's not actually that good against the creature decks. Like, it's good against them, but you're not beating them like in 80% of the matches or something crazy, I don't think. And honestly, like the black decks aren't even competitive enough that the creature decks give any thought to how they should be constructed to be good against the black deck. Like that deck doesn't even perform well enough that it registers on people's radar as a deck they should care about. I guess I'd like to Spikefield Hazard this if I can. It looks like I'm playing against probably the same deck or a similar deck. Maybe not the exact same deck. That's pretty nice. I think I'll Disruption the pest summoning, given the opportunity. And then go Celestus Hazard the Eye Twitch. Vorpal Sword, that is a weird inclusion. So standard game plan here, just try to build up a bunch of mana. And set up for a point where I can get the Hullbreaker Horror out and protect it. I guess they're putting a bit of a clock on me now that they've got Vorpal Sword plus a string of pests. I'll Disruption that. It's 2 cards and a treasure in a spot where they just missed a land drop. Pretty good for the opponent. How many pest summonings do they have? Isn't that the third one? It's kind of crazy. This feels like it's going to die. I wouldn't be doing this except I've got a second one. I don't really want to not spend my 7 mana. It didn't die. What are they doing over there? Guess I'll let that resolve. I could bounce it back to their hand. Problem with that is I spend a lot of mana. And I use one of my last instants to do it. I think I want this in my hand just because it's an instant. It's a 1 mana card I can use to trigger the horror. I think my hand's good enough that I shouldn't loot. Actually, not really. So this is an unusual version of a black control deck. I definitely want Cinderclasm here. I think I definitely want Test of Talents. Probably want Goldspan Dragon. Maybe something like that. I don't have Disdainful Stroke in my deck right now. It's probably better than Cathartic Pyre. It's a tough choice there between foretelling and leaving Test of Talents up. They could have a card like Go Blank. Sedgemoor Witch isn't that scary. Not having a third land is on the scary side. If Deadly Dispute, I'm definitely going to Test of Talents it if they do. Why are they floating mana in the combat step? Meat Hook Massacre and Pest Summoning in there. And does this deck even have Lolth in it? Yeah, it has Lolth. There's an Even Death. Teresa's. I don't see any copies of Go Blank. Good to know. I can't just play the Lier there because obviously they would just Infernal Grasp it. You can use permission if from your graveyard with Lier if you also have a bounce spell. You just have to cast the counter and hold full control, and in response bounce the Lier. It doesn't come up all that often, but it is a play that you can occasionally make. Getting a little bit low in terms of life total, but not so low that I should be concerned unless something like that happens. That is truly awful for me. Although if I just drawn a land, I would have just killed it. I'm gonna hope that my opponent just messed up with the Hollow Storm Giants. They did not. I'm dead. Okay. That went bad really fast. Even if they have village rights, they're going to wind up discarding to hand size. This one Smoldering Egg has been doing a lot of work. He didn't even cast anything? Okay. Truly not a scary play in the least. I'll just pass. They're really not going anywhere fast. I guess they could have Plumb the Forbidden to recoup some of the cards they're about to be down. So I could spend 1 extra mana to not have to ping the Even Death here. But 1 extra mana is a lot, given that now I have Test of Talents and Disdainful Stroke left up. I can counter 1 copy of Plumb the Forbidden. That's just countering a random card. I'd much rather put the counter on something they're going to spend mana on. This next turn's maybe a little bit scary. Just because they have a whole new hand. Probably going to start with the rest, and I'm going to Test of Talents it. And then we'll go from there. Blood on the Snow. I divide by 0 that, they go to 12. I get Teachings of the Archaic, they go to 10. I think I want to divide by 0 just because it's a 6 mana card. Given my hand, bouncing this back into their hand is basically the same thing as countering it this game. Just going to play this as a tap land. I think I'm going to need it to make a land drop at some point this game. This is one of those hands where it'd be nice to know what I'm playing against. If I was playing against White Weenie, I would not play this as a land. I think against almost any other deck, it's better to play it as a land. I'm against this Black Snow deck again. This time it has white in it as well. And wouldn't be the worst draw. Lets me pass and make my land drop, and the Celestus is going to flip. I'm certainly happy to get rid of a Fading Hope. I might keep this Fading Hope and just discard this land here. That was a good hand. Very good turn. That's a pretty ambitious teaching of the Archaics. But I'm anticipating them spending a lot of time casting the same cards over and over. So we'll see how it goes. They're pretty heavily representing that they have Vanishing Verse the way they played. Assuming they try to Vanishing Verse this, I'll Fading Hope the Edgar and use the Hullbreaker Horror trigger to bounce the Hullbreaker Horror back to my hand. Nothing surprising about how this is going. This also means they played 2 spells, so the Celestus is going to flip back again, which is good. It's too many copies of Unexpected Windfall. This is actually a little bit scary because they have another Vanishing Verse or just any card that can kill the Hullbreaker Horror. They could maybe go Loth, kill the Hullbreaker Horror, and actually accomplish something.
Darkness will swallow the light. A gift in exchange for loyalty. A pity our time is over.
This is their last window to try to make something happen. Necrotic Fumes is an incredibly bad way to try to kill a Hullbreaker Horror. Should I play Lier? And don't think it really matters. I guess I probably shouldn't. So this deck again, I think I want the counters. Guess I want Goldspan Dragon. The reason I keep boarding in Goldspan Dragon is that it gives me a... They have to interact with it, and it gives me a mana advantage when they do. And this matchup is largely about just getting a mana advantage, I think. I left a lot of Fading Hopes in my deck this time, maybe too many. It's a bit of a struggle to see how to sideboard because it seems like it's pretty hopeless for them to win, almost regardless of how I board. No blue mana. Clearly not ideal. I think I should just mulligan. It's pretty easy to get out from under a mulligan just by drawing a single copy of Expressive Iteration. That hand had an Expressive Iteration, but it also didn't have any mana to cast it. I'm killing these things not because I really fear taking 1 damage a turn, but because I don't want them to Deadly Dispute it. So like I said, I think a mana advantage is the way that their deck wins. If they Deadly Dispute that and get to make a treasure, I think 2 treasures early on in the game can be a pretty big advantage. I want to disrupt that. I don't think so. This gives them a land, but it doesn't really help them get a mana advantage because they're still just going to make 1 land drop a turn. That I will disrupt, though. Eventually I'll need a way to deal with this Professor of Symbology. It's one of their more annoying cards, really. Faceless Haven's a little bit on the scary side, because I don't have an answer for it right now. It would require them to be willing to go for it, but they actually only have 1 snow mana source right now. Now they have 2. They miscounted. I think they thought they had... Well, they have 3, but they don't have 4. You need 4 to be able to attack with the Faceless Haven. Unless this is some sort of trick and they're going to Deadly Dispute it. That was a really poor draw. Guess I'm just gonna hope they can't kill that, but they seem pretty likely to be able to. Not good for me. Well, I don't see what could go wrong with this. Just playing a Lier and having it block a Faceless Haven seems guaranteed to work. Does require them to invest 4 mana. So that is something. What in the world was the point of doing that? Maybe you should have just blocked with the Hollow Storm Giants. It seems like this has to be a mistake to attack here. But I'm giving them an out to it not being a mistake by trying to block with the thing that they can maybe kill. There's no way they're killing the Hollow Storm Giants. I guess it works out better for me. Maybe that was their plan all along, was just to get me to spend mana so that then they could Deadly Dispute their land away. It's kind of a weird plan, but I guess it's the thing that they can do. I guess I sort of messed up. I should have put the Celestus in my hand, and then I could have looted it away by activating the Celestus that was in play. Something has to go incredibly wrong for the blue-red deck to lose to that white-black deck. On a land there is pretty nice. It makes me feel very comfortable to just play Spikefield Hazard. Leading Spirit is kind of annoying. Probably have to let it just hit me a little bit. Eventually it'll get to the point where I can block it with Lier. Imagine if I try to bounce it back to their hand, they'll probably just discard. They probably don't have any cards in their main deck that can get Lier off the board, but maybe they do. Looks like Lier is destined to cost an extra 2 mana, though. I probably messed up by not just Cathartic Pyring this. If they do have an answer to Lier, they'll just leave the Lier in my hand and they'll make the Cathartic Pyre cost 2 extra. And then maybe I could actually be in trouble. Land wouldn't be a bad draw. Because it would give me 7 mana. For next turn. That is a potentially annoying card. I'd really like to find Jwari Disruption on top of my deck. Or Cinderclasm. Not the Hullbreaker Horror, though. Doesn't make a ton of sense for them to have led with Stonebinder's Familiar. They weren't going to play something to exile. How desperate am I to hit a land drop? Not that desperate. There's no need to really do anything. Doesn't seem like this is a spot the opponent can win through. Excuse me. Alright, White Weenie again. Bliss Bolt and Cinderclasm, easy inclusions. I think Lier is probably better than Hullbreaker Horror. Don't really like the Prismari commands. Don't really like having tons of Fading Hopes. I've land 2 spells, not great, but Cinderclasm is one of the absolute best cards to have in your opening hand in this matchup. Come on, no Luminarch Aspirant. Second Usher of the Fallen, maybe? Curse of Silence, okay. You gonna name Cinderclasm? Because if you're not, you're gonna be sad. Expressive Iteration. Guess I'll just do it now because of Valorous Stance. Seems likely if they have a Luminarch Aspirant in their hand, they would have played it the turn before. Just gonna let this hit me. See if they play a juicier target. It's fine. Let's see what they do with the counter. If the Aspirant targets itself, I would Spikefield Hazard it. This way I get to prevent 2 damage. and spend my mana more efficiently. Earlier we had an example of why you shouldn't play with Paladin class. This is an example of why you just shouldn't play with Curse of Silence. Curse of Silence only makes sense if you're planning to name Auron's Epiphany with it. And that just doesn't happen often enough anymore. I could still lose, maybe if their last card in hand is Valorous Stance, and I play the Lier. I think I'm going to play the Lier this turn, so let's see if they have Valorous Stance. If they don't have Valorous Stance, I win the game, basically. If they do, the game continues, and I'm really not in that bad a shape. Come on, please be playing White Weenie. It worked. If I didn't already have a second Spikefield Hazard, it might have made a little sense to wait. See if they wanted to play a Luminarch Aspirant. But given that I have the second copy, I might as well just use my mana. They had Valorous Stance or Fateful Absence. I guess they would have won the game there. As it stands, I think they are in horrifically bad shape. Guess they're putting up a little bit of a fight to dig out of this, but it's going to be very hard. Alright, same sideboarding plan. Cinderclasm, Flame Blessed Bolts, third Lier. Hullbreaker Horror. Turn 2 Fading Hopes. Turn 2 Prismari Commands. Pretty important to play the Spikefield Hazard, or to play the coast on the first turn so that I can play the Spikefield Hazard on the second turn. Pretty scary Thalia, never mind. I've drawn some juicy Cinderclasms this run. Again, I'm doing that on my turn because of Valorous stance. I'm giving up a little bit of equity, or a little bit of possibility of getting to pick off a Luminarch Aspirant, but I'm also really avoiding any risk that from them Valor stancing to keep the Thalia on the board. For those of you who have made it this far, this will be the last game. Hope people are enjoying these videos. I'm having fun making them. And if you are, please remember to subscribe. I'm trying to get my channel to grow, and the more that it grows, the more videos I'll be able to make, and the better I'll get at making them. Alright, I don't want them to be playing White Weenie this time because I didn't draw any Spikefield Hazards. This is just a generally good hand. They mulled the 6. It's White Weenie again. White Weenie is probably the most popular deck, so it's really not that surprising. This is kind of a nice curve out for Tell on turn 2. Turn 3 I'll have the Celestus and be able to cast Demon Bolt. So it's kind of like I got to play a removal spell on turn 2. Opponent's not too proud to brag about that attack there. I like it. I guess I'm just going to kill this thing. They probably have a better play to make on turn 3 than attack and boast again, but I don't know, that's worth taking 2 damage just to find that fact out for sure. Prismari Command seems like the worst spell I have in my hand, but I want to see what they do. See, maybe I'll need to actually cast it. It's when you cast the second spell, so I might need to decide based on what the first spell they had, what the first spell they cast is, whether or not I would like to play the play the Prismari Command, and I think the answer is I'm not going to play it at this point because I'm just going to be Spikefield Hazarding this thing, and I'll Unexpected Windfall away the Prismari Command, hoping to find a Lier or maybe a Hullbreaker Horror. There's a Lier. How good of a Lier is it? It's not insane. Probably good enough. Let's start with a Consider, though. I'd really like to make a land drop this turn. It'd be nice if my Lier lives. If it doesn't live, it's not that big of a deal. Because I have double Expressive Iteration. And I'll get a little bit of the value on the way out from the Lier. I'll just take out this flying creature. I didn't take a point. Okay. I'm going to cast at least one Prismari Command in their upkeep. Let's see what I draw here, though. Fading Hope. Pretty nice. Doesn't matter a ton what I do here, I don't think. The 1/2 is really not going to get it done for the opponent, especially with him drawing lands. Well, if you're interested in blue-red Lier against white Weenie, you've certainly gotten to see plenty of that. Or if you're interested in blue-red Lier against white-black Control, you've gotten to see a lot of that too. I think the harder matchups for these blue-red Lier decks are as if you play against a blue-black Lier deck. Because the blue-black deck can have actual cards that can kill Hullbreaker Horror and has discard. Whereas the blue-red Lier deck basically just has some bounce spells and creature removal, like small creature removal. Battlefield Raptor is a bird. It continues to amaze me the variety of 1-drops that are played in white Weenie decks. I don't think my opponent had much fun this game. All right, now let's see who's been paying attention. If you've been paying attention, you'll remember that this is how you sideboard every round. All right, pretty reasonable hand. Not a fan of this card. Especially if it's not going to get counter on turn 2. I think I'll probably kill it with Flameless Bolt unless they play something else for me to kill. I don't know why you would start with the Spellbinder, but alright, I'll kill it. That was probably a timing mistake on my part. I should have waited to see what they were going to remove, given that I had 2 Flameless Bolts. Time for Lier. Lier and just pray. There's no Valorous Stance in my future. What's the alternative? Divide by 0 and get nothing great. Guess I could play Expressive Iteration plus Divide by Zero this turn. I think I'm at a high enough life total that I should do that at least once. I don't think I really want another Windfall, so. A reason not to do this beginning of combat? No. That's just not a very good play by the opponent. They should go to the beginning of combat and wait to see what I do. I guess when they have the land, maybe it's fine. Taking a good bit of damage here. A Field of Ruin or anything floating around. That doesn't work. This is kind of a sloppy play. I probably could have survived. I could have played my turn in a way that I could have Divide by Zero to protect my Lier. Paladin class. Not an impressive card. All right. That's the end of that run. That was... Is that 3 black decks and then 4 white decks? Not the most diverse of selections, but at least a lot of the top decks. The top decks being white decks. Hope you enjoyed, and I hope you subscribe so you can catch the next video. See you then.